So in my first video, I read out all the 32 book titles that I had managed to finish up until then. Because I didn't get to review any of the books, I literally was just naming all of them. I'm planning to do separate videos which would act as mini reviews, if you will, of all the books that I named in that first video. And because I'm making it my personal mission to keep my videos under 8 minutes because I have terrible attention span, today I'm going to talk about the non-fiction books only. Actually, non-fiction and poetry. Okay, let's get to our first book. Storytelling with Data by nussbaumer. This book, I rated it a 5-star on Goodreads because it is incredibly helpful. I wish I had read this book when I was in college because it gives you all the examples under the sun with regards to data visualization, which is a very important skill. In college, a lot of the times what I struggled with was I had a lot of numbers that I wanted to show and I couldn't pick and choose which ones were the most relevant. And this book does exactly just that. It really lays out all the crucial points of what you need to have and what you may not really need to have on a presentation. I would say that the topic is kind of narrow. I'm not saying it's not holistic or comprehensive, but it is about picking which data would be best suited for the story that you want to tell. In case that wasn't clear, I would say this is a business book. I think it's good general knowledge, honestly. So this one is another business book. It is Swipe to Unlock. So this book was written by product managers at Google, Facebook, and Microsoft. It basically demystifies how tech actually works. For someone who works in tech, I actually went into it without knowing too much, and I wish I had read this book before I started my first startup job. I would say that this book was made for people who are not very familiar with how the tech industry works behind the scenes. The format of this book makes it very easy to read. The way it's structured is that it has a question and then a very concise answer to it. Like, for example, how do people sell drugs and stolen credit card numbers online? And then it gives you the answer. There are frameworks and everything that are very easy to understand, and I would highly recommend it to friends who are thinking of switching career from a more conventional industry to tech. So next one is How to Lie with Statistics by Darrell Huff. Apparently, this is a classic statistics book. And honestly, maybe this is because English is my second language, but I did find the language a bit hard. However, it did an amazing job in summarizing basically all what you thought statistics was and what it really is. I especially love the chapter which discussed the use of graphics in statistics. Like, for example, in newspapers or magazines, maybe you want to say, oh, people these days have 50% more savings than people 5 years ago. And they give you figures like a piggy bank and then a slightly bigger piggy bank. And that chapter discusses how this bigger piggy bank is not 50% bigger. It's actually 200% because, you know, you need to take into account the width and the height. And I thought that was very interesting. As someone who works in a job that needs to be mindful of numbers, this is very helpful in catching all those, I wouldn't say mistakes, but all those pitfalls or where my analysis might seem weak because of my faulty numbers. The next book is Modern Romance by Aziz Ansari. I have mixed feelings about this book. I started it a couple of years ago, probably like 2015, but I never got around to finishing it. The first chapters talk mainly about online dating, which is not really something I'm interested in. So I guess that's why I fell out of interest. But because I'm a terrible completionist, I was like, you know what, I need to finish this book. So I did, and the last few chapters talked about dating phenomenons in other parts of the world. Those parts were interesting, but yeah, I did start this book a while ago, and then the whole scandal happened. That's why I was a bit, should I even continue the book? But it was written alongside a researcher. If you want some scientific knowledge behind how people date and why people use online dating, then it could be the book for you. The next book is an Indonesian book, and it's Masih Belajar by Usman. So I am one of those people who have been following Iman's journey since IFL days. I was still in college, he was still in college. I can see that it's targeted to high school students, I wouldn't see a world where a college senior would be impacted as much. I'm not saying that this book is weak in that sense, no, but I think it would be most helpful to you if you're still in junior or high school. So I finished this on a plane, on like a single flight, and it's How to Ruin Everything by George Watsky. Listen, I wanted to love this book so badly. It's so funny, it's so witty, but the references are very American-centric, and I'm not blaming him for that. He is from the US, but as someone who is not from the US, I was very confused at some parts, so I didn't enjoy it as much as I thought I would. However, the storytelling and the writing is amazing. That's why I kept reading it. And the next book is Good Morning, Good Night, Little Pep Talks for Me and You by Lin-Manuel Miranda and Jonny's son. This book is just... I'm so thankful I have this book on my shelf. This is a very quick read. It is mainly illustrations. There's very little writing, but you read it and you can feel your heart grow 5 times bigger because it's so positive, but at the same time, it's telling you that it's okay to not feel okay. For example, this one. Look how cute it is. Good morning. I wish you clarity today. Clarity of thought, clarity of expression, and a direct line between what you feel and what to do about it. And then for the night one, it says, Good night. I wish you clarity tonight. Clarity of self, clarity of purpose, and a direct line between who you want to be and how to get there. Thank you, Lin-Manuel Miranda. And the next 2 books I'm gonna pull up at the same time because I am planning a separate review on both of them because they mean so much to me. And it's Sapiens by Yuval Noah Harari and A Short History of Nearly Everything by Bryson. These 2 books actually kicked off my reading spree this year, I would say, because I didn't read a lot of books last year. I read very little and even fewer the years before. So I'm very glad that I started off 2019 with these books because these are the kind of books that just make you want to learn more about everything that is available for you to learn. And I don't think books can get any better than that. That is all I will say about these 2 books for now because like I mentioned, I am planning to do separate reviews on both of them. And the next book I want to talk about is a book I owe a lot to, and it's Hacking Growth by Sean Ellis and Morgan Brown. My actual job revolves around growth hacking, and I so wish I had read this sooner because I did go into this job not knowing a lot of things, and had I read this book earlier, I would have understood at least more things than I did back then when I started. This book is very prescriptive. It really lays out all the details of what you need to do in order to make your team work better, or in this case, in order to meet your business goals. But it's not just a business book that goes like, oh, here's an example of how Airbnb did this or how PayPal did this. It actually gives you instructions on how to run meetings, how to write reports so that people would understand it better. And I don't find many books that generous or well written in that regard. So yeah, I appreciate this book a lot and I will definitely have it with me all the time. And now on to the poetry books. So I read 4 poetry collections this year. This is an Indonesian book. It's Masuk, Toko, Keluar di Tokyo. First of all, isn't that the smartest book title you could ever come up with? Like, this poetry collection is so funny. I think people who think they don't like poetry or think poetry is too cheesy for them should definitely pick this book up. The next one is Ada Limón. Is that how you say it? The Carrying. I was given this book by my good friend Shay, and she gave me this book without me really knowing what it was. And I just have to thank her endlessly for doing that. I love it, and it made me want to go back to treating literature like how I used to in high school, which was, to analyze them and to really derive meaning out of each and every poem. I did bookmark some poems that I want to go back to from time to time, just to experience it for the second time. And the next poetry book I read was by Chen Chen, When I Grew Up, I Want to Be a List of Further Possibilities. These poetry books just have the prettiest titles ever. I'm just very glad I stumbled upon it. I did not know Chen Chen before. I got this from Book Depository, and I had to wait a long time to get this. As I was editing this video, I realized that I had left out 2 books out of the wrap-up, and these 2 books are 84 Sharing Crossroad by Helene Hanff and The Anatomy of Being by Shinji Moon. So this is a poetry collection, whereas 84 Sharing Crossroad is a collection of letters that Helene exchanged with her dear friend Frank. Helene lives in New York, whereas Frank lives all the way in London. Lived. Frank worked at a bookstore on 84 Sharing Crossroad in London, and Helene basically, sent him letters asking for books that she couldn't find, or very specific titles. And this initially business-oriented exchange developed into a friendship. This was a delight, honestly. It was witty, it was funny. It's one of those books that just warm your heart, so definitely pick this up. And The Anatomy of Being, oh my goodness. I avoided reading this book for so long. Okay, I wanted it since, I don't even remember anymore. I first came across Shinji Moon's poems on Tumblr, I believe, like back in 2010 or 2011. And I knew that I wanted her book, but I just never got around to buying it, and I finally did, like a couple of years ago, maybe 2 years ago. I was just so scared because I knew that her poems would affect me in such a way. I don't know, have you ever avoided a book because of that? Because for me, I do need to feel mentally prepared to start a book, and this was one of those books. I adore Shinji Moon's poems. I know people have problems with like Tumblr or Instagram poets, but at the end of the day, these social media channels are just platforms that these people have chosen to share their creations on, and it doesn't make any of them less of a writer or a poet. I personally think Shinji Moon is just, she writes in such a gorgeous way. Her poems remind me a lot of Richard Sickens. I don't know if I'm gonna get attacked for this, but I hope I won't. My favorite poem out of this was one called A Physician's Handbook. And let me just read my favorite line. Your body aches. You can feel yourself sighing all the way to your knees. Now tell me, what is the word for that? Shinji Moon! Well, I guess that's all for me. Please look forward to more of my videos. Bye!